Welcome to another episode of One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. Joining me this week, author and manager Vicky Hamilton, talking about her book, Appetite for Dysfunction, working in the early days with Poison, Guns N' Roses, Faster Pussycat, and more. On the other side, guitarist Lance Lopez talks about his new band, Supersonic Blues Machine, featuring vocalist Fabrizio Grazzi and drummer Kenny Aronoff. Their new album is called West of Flushing, South of Frisco. It is currently out on the Mascot Label Group label, for the lack of a better word. It features ZZ Top guitarist Billy Gibbons, also Walter Trout, Warren Hayes, Robin Ford, Eric Gales, and Chris Duarte. So please do check that out. But let's get started with the show. Here is the one, the only, Vicky Hamilton. We are speaking with Vicky Hamilton. Her new book is, of course, Appetite for Dysfunction. Working with, of course, Guns N' Roses, Poison, Mötley Crüe, Faster Pussycat, and all the bands we love from the 80s. Good day, Vicky.
Hey, how you doing, Mitch?
Good. A pleasure to talk to you. Your name has been in and around the industry for, 35, 40 years. We've heard all the stories. So let me just start with this. What compelled you to write a book? Because I know when you write this kind of book, somebody's feelings along the way gets hurt. You didn't pay them enough attention, or you said the wrong thing. What made you think, okay, I want to do this anyway?
Well, I've always thought that I would write a book. I made tapes and took notes back in the late 80s, about my career. I just thought that it was stories that needed to be heard. And, now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to forget some of the stories. So I thought now's the time. And I've actually worked on the book for 7 years. So it wasn't like, I just decided to write a book and did it. It took me a long time.
What was the time? Was it just trying to figure out what were the best stories, or was it, I got to make sure this one doesn't get me sued? So what took so long to get this out?
Well, I've been, I still manage bands. I'm writing screenplays. I wrote a musical play. I wrote the book, but I also had probably 2 or 3 other things going at the same time. So it wasn't like something I did every single day. But I tried to put a little effort towards it every week,
Right. So let's start at the beginning. The story goes that you interviewed Tom Petty back in your home state of Indiana, and he talked about being a California girl, and you said, that sounds good. Let me move out to California. When you packed up and moved out, what was the hope? Was it just, I'm going to be this beach girl, or, hey, I'm going to go and find something to do in this industry?
Well, you're being nice as far as the Tom Petty thing. I basically was stalking Tom Petty.
Right.
I came out to California and stayed for nearly a month. I didn't know anybody. I went back to Indiana and for a year saved money, and then I moved. I mean, the moment I hit the Sunset Strip, I was like, this is my home, and I was hell-bent on moving here. I just had to figure out how to afford to do it, as right. LA is not a cheap town.
No, and especially back then for people moving in from out of town, they got you doing all kinds of crazy jobs, and you pretty much do anything to survive, right?
Absolutely.
So let me talk about that. One of the first things you ended up doing was working with Alan Kaufman. And, of course, Alan Kaufman managed Mötley Crüe in the early days and was such a, he was a stable in the industry. What was it like working for Alan? What did you learn from Alan?
What did I learn? I learned a lot about display merchandising because that was kind of my main function for Mötley Crüe during that time period. And Alan was a real estate sort of guy, so he had a real sense of financing and, leading the pack. So I guess that's sort of what I learned from him.
And tell me about the relationship then with Mötley Crüe. What were those guys like? Because the stories are wild and they're crazy. Was it actually that, or is that some kind of a myth that they sort of built up?
Oh no, they were wild and crazy. Their Clark Street apartment was only rivaled by the Clark Street apartment that I lived in with Guns N' Roses. I don't know what it is about living on Clark Street and the Sunset Strip, but it can be pretty wild.
Yeah, it can especially be wild, especially in those days. All right, since Guns N' Roses is sort of the topic du jour, let's talk about that. Did you know the band at the time when Tracy Guns was part of the lineup?
That was, I started working with Axl and Izzy when they were Hollywood Rose, and then as a booking agent, I booked them at Silver Lining, and then Tracy sort of entered into the picture a little after that time period, and I wasn't really in the loop when Tracy was in the band, and it wasn't until Slash was in the band that I took an interest in managing. So I really never had an involvement with Tracy Guns.
Okay. And of course, when Slash came in, were you involved with Slash when he had tried out for the band Poison, for example?
Oh yeah, I set that up.
Yeah, so good, because it's one of those stories that we've heard about but not really explored. Talk to me about that. So Bret and the guys come in. They don't have C.C. DeVille at that point because what was his name? I guess Matt Young or something like that was the guy at the time.
Matt Smith.
Matt Smith, right? And he decides that he has to go back to Pennsylvania. Can't handle it.
Not that he couldn't handle it. His girlfriend was pregnant, and he wanted to do the right thing. I
Gotcha.
mean, Matt was a very sweet, loving guy. And I think he's still with her, actually,
Wow,
which is admirable.
Well, yeah.
I think they have a bunch of kids. So.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me about the audition process. Were you working with the Poison camp at that time, or were you just...
Yeah, I was the manager of Poison, and, I liked Slash a lot. I knew him when he was in Black Sheep for like 10 minutes, and, I just thought he would be great in the band. And he got the gig, and, I think that the Poison guys expected him to be really excited, and basically he said, okay, well, I'm not going to wear all the makeup, and I won't say, hi, my name's Slash. That didn't sit well with Bret and company, and, a day or two later, enter C.C. DeVille, so.
Yeah, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at then the inception. Though at that point, he goes back to Guns N' Roses, or he somewhat gets involved with Guns N' Roses. What was it like in those early days? Because if you talk to Alan Niven or Tom Zutaut or any of the guys in the early days, they say that this band was unmanageable. They were going to get dropped left, right, and center. Nobody wanted to deal with them. What was your experience in terms of setting up potential showcases and record deals? And
I never saw Guns N' Roses do a bad show. So
right.
When it came down to the actual performing, they were always on. Like with Faster Pussycat, their shows were either great or terrible. But Guns N' Roses I never saw do a bad show.
So what was it like then? I mean, now Axl has this reputation of he does what he wants, he shows up when he wants. Was there more attention to being quote-unquote professional back in the day where, okay, a club paid us and we show up at 10 and we play, or was it always sort of the same kind of it'll be what it'll be attitude?
There was certainly some of that there. I mean, we were 3 hours late to go sign the recording contract, so that was very early on. I just think that Axl wanted to show up when he felt ready, and I don't think he was really aware of time and space,
So what do you think of the band now as they are?
I went to the show in Vegas, and it was, how you think as musicians, they're at the top of their game. I mean, as far as how they play and they sing. I miss some of the raw energy and the live performance. it has a different feel. And, certainly I miss Steven and Izzy, so it's not quite the same band that I worked. And, they're not 20 anymore either, so there's, I don't know, it was kind of bittersweet for me. It's like I loved seeing it in the huge professional arena, but I missed some of the early day qualities.
Right, some of the early day Troubadour shows and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'd never seen them in the big arena thing. Like, I didn't go to any of the Use Your Illusion shows or any of that. So that was really kind of the first time I saw them, like, huge, in a big arena. So.
That's kind of remarkable after everything they had been through. A couple of years ago, Steven Adler gave an interview where he started talking about Kim Fowley, the famous manager, Runaways, and all that. And Kim had sort of suggested that you were too pretty to be a manager. And was there that kind of, I don't want to call it a sexism, but maybe that's what it is, back in the day of being a female manager where people just went, well, she's too pretty. She's just a girl. We can't take her seriously. Did you fight that kind of?
I did. And, okay. I think I held my own pretty well during that time period. I certainly, got Guns N' Roses through the bidding war, and we had lunch and dinner with everyone, and I got them Peter Paterno, and, I think I did my job pretty well. But, yeah, I mean, Kim Fowley said a lot of things to, like, discredit me, and he wanted to sign their publishing for, like, $2,500, and that didn't happen. So, whatever. God bless his soul.
Right, God bless his soul, but yeah, so much for him.
I think I did pretty good.
Yeah, you did. And so when you get the band and you've brought them around to all these places, and eventually they sign with their label, they don't decide to retain you. They look at Tom Zutaut, they look at Alan Niven. Why do you think at that point they weren't more loyal and decided to keep you around? Why did they move on?
I think that they felt like they needed male managers, and that, I believe that Tom Zutaut said to them they needed major management, kind of discrediting me as a major manager. And at that point, Tom had promised me an A&R job. So, after Mötley Crüe and Poison and Stryper and Guns N' Roses, I kind of felt like I, wanted the stability of a paycheck, So, and I wanted to learn about making records. So it was kind of mutual at that point in time.
Gotcha. And you mentioned Stryper. I love the story about Stryper because, we hear all the time about musical differences and creative differences, but we don't hear a lot about spiritual differences as a reason for a parting of the ways. Explain what was going on with Stryper. They just thought you weren't a good person. Like, what is spiritual differences?
Well, I knew Stryper when they were Rock's Regime, and I was a cocktail waitress at Gazzari's, and they never mentioned me this Christian aspect of themselves. And, I even went to their rehearsal in La Mirada, and, even though I saw the Isaiah 53:5 thing, it didn't occur to me that they were like Christians. It wasn't like until I saw them throwing Bibles into the crowd that it finally dawns on me, okay, what am I dealing with here? And I grew up with a very sort of Southern Baptist, family where it was like sort of God-fearing and whatever, and I've always been more of a spiritualist than a Christian, I guess I want to say.
Right.
So it was, all that comes to mind is God bless. It's like, they can like worship however they want to, and I can too,
Right. If you have to look back at Michael Sweet, though, the lead singer of Stryper, as a person, how would you describe him? Because I've always had a very great relationship with him in terms of interviews and stuff like that. How was he for you?
I thought he was amazingly talented, and he was always very professional. I dealt more with Robert Sweet than I did with Michael, because Robert seemed to be sort of the band leader. Like every band sort of has their own leader. Like, Robert was the Stryper leader. Like, I felt Bobby Dahl was the business person in Poison. Slash was the business person in Guns N' Roses. Nikki Sixx and Mötley Crüe, they all have the one. But Michael was, very professional, and I don't have a bad word about him at all. He was a good guy.
Yeah, he really is. I do want to ask you about some of the bands that didn't have the huge success of Mötley and Poison and Guns N' Roses. Let me start off with Salty Dog, their first album that came out.
Great record.
It was fantastic. I actually bought it. I paid for it. I thought it was fantastic. And when I bought records back then, having had been a Kiss fan and a Cheap Trick fan and an Aerosmith fan, I thought that bands would just live forever and never disappear. And of course, Every Dog Had Its Day was one of those where I thought, well, I'm going to be a Salty Dog fan for the next 20 years of my life. And of course, that didn't happen. What was going on with Salty Dog? How did you discover them or get involved with them? And why didn't they become the next Mötley Crüe?
I managed Salty Dog, and actually when I became a A&R street scout for Geffen, Tom Zutaut had passed on Salty Dog, and there was a show at the Whiskey A Go-Go that Salty Dog and Darling Cruel both played, and they both got signed off of that show. And it was like Salty Dog had a really good show that night, and Tom was like, wow, I think I've misjudged this. We need to, sign them. I really felt like Salty Dog was going to be a huge band. Jimmy had some drug problems, and I think that is probably ultimately what killed the career of the band. He's, sober now, and I'm really happy for that. But during that time period, I thought we might lose him,
But I mean, the guys in Guns N' Roses had problems. The guys in Mötley Crüe had problems that are of mythical proportions, and they somehow managed to pull through. Was it just?
Yeah. Well, some people can handle it, and some
people can't. Right?
I mean, I've been clean and sober myself 15 years, and I always managed to do my daily job. Of course, I wasn't a heroin addict, but some people, I don't know, it's fun until it isn't fun anymore.
Right. Just before we have to wrap up, Tame Me Down of Faster Pussycat, like you've said, and I've seen them on the road many times. I was out on tour with them with Poison on that, what was it, Faster Pussycat, Great White, whatever it was, LA Guns, I think. You're right. Some nights it's absolutely brilliant, and the very next night it's a complete disaster. Talk to me about working with Tammy and Faster Pussycat, and there's another band that should have been a lot bigger than they were.
Well, that probably had to do somewhat with that it wasn't consistent, like it wasn't every night brilliant, and I don't know how to explain what happens when it isn't brilliant, but when it's off, and everybody knows. I love Tammy, and I wish him the best. I mean, he's still out there doing it. God bless him, It's like, and he's taken it to a whole different place than when I, managed the band. It's almost become this goth sort of biker band now, and I like that too. I mean, I went last year and I really enjoyed it,
Yeah, no.
So he's able to change it and keep it interesting,
Yeah, he's interesting, and we'll
he's a good person too, Tammy has a really nice spirit and soul about him,
Oh, I agree. Every time I've spoken to him or met him, he's been nothing but courteous and kind. He's great. I love Tammy. Steven Adler was supposed to take part on a limited basis in the Guns N' Roses reunion, goes to rehearsal, second day, throws out his back. Boy, what a bad break for him. What are your thoughts on Steven? Because he's been your champion at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. he's the one that said, "Hey, Vicky," and he's always said in interviews, "Hey, Vicky." What does he mean to you?
You know, Stephen has such a sweet spirit too, and you know, when I managed the band, he wasn't like messed up on drugs at all. He was, you know, he smoked a little pot and whatever. He was kind of the California surfer boy of the band, and always just like this beaming light of, you know, optimism. No matter what was going on, he was like there and ready to go. You know, what has happened recently, I don't know any of the details, and you know, I reached out to him yesterday and I haven't heard back, but you know, I love Stephen, and I love his band Adler. I think it's a really good band. You know, it's like the singer's great, the guitar players are great, the songwriting's really good. I can't fault anything that he's doing, and he's been sober for a year and a half, so, you know, That's really, really good.
Yeah, and that's important because we know that he's tried to become sober in the past, and it's been an up and down battle, and so this time it seems to be sticking. So you can't ask for more than that. I mean, forget Guns N' Roses, forget Adler, forget all that stuff. His health is number one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Vicky, a great pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Would love to hear the show, so send me a link.
Yes, absolutely. It should be up in about a week, and I will send that right over to you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Mitch. All right, talk to you later.
And there you have it, folks, my interview with author and manager Vicky Hamilton, looking back on her days working with Poison, Mötley Crüe, Guns N' Roses, and many, many more. Let's head over right now to Lance Lopez talking about his new band, Supersonic Blues Machine, featuring Fabrizio Grazzi and drummer Kenny Arnoff. Billy Gibbons is a guest from ZZ Top on this album, and many other things. Here is the one, the only, Lance Lopez. We are speaking with Lance Lopez, guitarist extraordinaire. New band is Supersonic Blues Machine. Debut album is West of Flushing, South of Frisco. Great little project you've got there. You've got Kenny Arnoff in there as well, the drummer to the stars. Talk to me about how the band got together.
Well, and thanks for having me, first off. And, Supersonic Blues Machine has been a project that's been in the works for a couple of years now. And it's so fantastic to finally see, you know, all the hard work we put in the last couple of years out in Los Angeles kind of come to fruition and the album be released. Basically what happened was I've been touring Europe for quite some time as a solo artist. And around between 2010 and 2011 and 12, somewhere around in there, my tours, I did one of the biggest tours of my career. And during that tour, people all over Europe, as well as Eastern Europe and Western Europe and all over, kept mentioning this guy, Fabrizio Grazzi. And everybody kept asking me if I knew him and asking me if I'd worked with him. And I said, no, and this was all over Europe. And we had a lot of mutual friends. And then everybody just kept saying, you guys need to hook up, you know. And so basically, it was always in the back of my mind. I thought, wow, all these people keep telling me about Fabrizio. So when I got back to the States, it was time to start working on it. I did one more album with Jim Gaines, legendary producer, and then I went on to do the next thing, and I thought, man, everybody kept mentioning Fabrizio. So I looked him up, and we connected online, and then I went out to L.A. and met up with Fabrizio. And as soon as we got in the studio, it was just like everybody in Europe had been telling me. I mean, it was magic chemistry. We were instantaneous, best friends. You know, it's just one of those things. I mean, you know, we were just joined at the hip, you know, right off the bat. And I'd sent him some songs I'd been writing and working on, and we got in the studio and then came out 3 days later with 3 or 4 songs. So it was like we were supposed to be an hour meeting, and then it ended up turning into like a 3-4 day studio, you know, demo session project. So we came out of there just totally blown away with the work we've done, the chemistry we had. And I went back to Texas, and Fabrizio went back to work, you know, on some other projects. And one of those projects, he was working with Billy Gibbons. And had been working on Billy on some demos for that last ZZ Top record. And Billy called Fabrizio and said, hey, can we get together and do some work? And Fabrizio said, sure, of course. And then Billy asked Fabrizio, what have you been up to? And he said, man, it's funny you ask. We had a guy from Texas here 2 days ago, Lance Lopez. And Billy was like, oh, my gosh, I've known Lance since he was a kid. And I've known Billy Gibbons since I was about 15 years old. So, and kind of grew up around those guys and toured with ZZ Top and played many shows and have hung with Billy for many years in many places. So, it was really cool. So that he was the one that went to the region and said, you two guys need to form a band. And initially he wanted to be in the band. Billy said, you guys form a band and I'll be in it. Billy's always got these creative, these big creative kind of ideas and he comes up with all this. He's just such a visionary, and so that was the initial thing. And so Fab thought about it for a couple of days, and he thought, man, if we're going to put a band together, we need the best drummer I can find. And he took the stuff that we had worked on, that Fab and I had worked on in L.A., the demos we had cut, over to Kenny Aronoff. And Kenny and he had played with Steve Lukather, and then they had done an album with Leslie West and various other projects together. And he took those recordings over to Kenny Aronoff, and Aronoff just, after midway through the first song, was like, I'm in. There was no question. He didn't even need the 4 measures of the first song, and he was already there. So, which was a big deal to me, because growing up in the 80s and the MTV generation of the 80s and all that, I was a huge still am a huge Mellencamp fan. And his lead guitar player at one time, David Grissom, down in Austin, is a very close friend of mine. So, there was that Mellencamp connection, and I just grew up watching, Kenny on MTV with Mellencamp. So it was just surreal. Aside from everybody else that he's played with, he's somebody from my childhood that was, playing with the biggest pop star and, one of the biggest in the world in the 80s. So that I kind of grew up watching. So it was a big deal, and, so anyhow, going back to the Gibbons connection, it was really Gibbons that kind of precipitated it. And so the first thing we cut was Running Whiskey with Billy Gibbons, and which had been a track he had been working on with this young lady by the name of Tal Wilkenfeld, who played bass with Jeff Beck for a while. They had wrote this, they'd been working on this song, and they brought it in, and Fabrizio and all of them, they kind of finished it and then re-recorded it. And that kind of set the tone for, which way we were going. It was like, wow, this is cool. So then we had Billy, and then Billy was like, I got to go back to ZZ Top. I got to go back to doing my thing. So, then we thought, well, we got Billy here. We need to really make this into like a friends and family thing, because that's what Billy is. To us, he's friends and family. So it was like, who else is that we love the most? That's our friends and family. The next person we thought of was Warren Haynes, then Walter Trout, then 2 of my dearest, closest friends, Eric Gales and Chris Duarte, and then one of my biggest heroes, Robin Ford. We brought in Robin Ford, and it was just, like I said, Billy was a mentor. Some of these guys were my best friends. Walter and Robin, who I've been huge fans of for many years. So it was really cool how it all came together. We just thought, and Billy kind of kicked it off like that. And so we wanted to make it into like a big kind of a jam, kind of a party thing, but not just be a big jam, not just it be, like a blues guitar-a-thon, kind of a shred fest thing. That's kind of fun live, but we thought, well, we're going to document this and make an album. We want to make this into a classic album with our friends. You know what I mean? And not just getting in a room and just jamming a blues shuffle over and over and everybody just kind of taking solos. We wanted to really handcraft something that was going to be, a document and to last for a long time, a musical document. So, and then we made the record in California. It was all done in LA, which kind of is the title of the album, West of Flushing, South of Frisco. It gives you the coordinates of kind of where we all converged, which was in Los Angeles. And, the band is LA based, and I'm the only one that's not there. I'm in Texas, and the other 2 guys are in California, but we consider our base of operations out of Los Angeles, and so that's hence the name again. And so that's how it all came together.
Yeah, it's a great story. Now, you mentioned Eric Gales. He was on your Wall of Soul album that came out a few years ago. You also had King's X Doug Pinnick on there.
Right.
Other than Supersonic Blues Machine, you also recently released Live in New York City as a solo artist. So where does this put you in terms of your musical future? Is Supersonic Blues Machine just one album, thank you very much, and that's it? Or is that where you want to go in the future? Or are you sort of balance both careers?
That's a great question. And, there's definitely going to be a balance, and Supersonic will be my band. There will be a difference. Supersonic Blues Machine is a band that I'm in, and it's great because I'm a band member. I'm the lead guitar player and lead singer, but I'm a member of a band, and which is much different than the Lance Lopez band, which is me fronting a power trio. And although Supersonic, the core of it is a power trio, there's a lot more in the ensemble than just guitar, bass, and drums. I mean, if you listen to the album, there's keys, there's background vocals, and some of that stuff Supersonic will be taking on the road. Supersonic won't just be a power trio on stage with Kenny Fabrizio and I just up there being like Cream. Now, my first reaction, I wanted to do that. That was but that's what I do with my band. My band is much more jam oriented and much more in that world than Supersonic is going to have, extra musicians kind of backing it. And then we'll have all our guests with us when we do go tour. We'll have at least 3 or more of our guests that were on our first album with us, on tour. And that's kind of the premise of that also. And then, this is not just a one and done. I mean, it's not a one-off. We are making plans for the next record. We're making plans to have some even more epic guests on our next record. So, and a lot of that, I'm not really at liberty to discuss, but it's going to be pretty serious. So we're already working on, a follow-up, making plans for that, making plans to kick off a tour. And then in the midst of it also, I'm working on, with my band, because my band is based here in Texas. So we play this whole region, and we go out and we play the, everywhere we can play. Supersonic is more of a specialty thing. Supersonic Blues Machine is something that has a lot of moving parts. There's, especially with bringing our guests out on the road with us and having them as guest, artists on tour or at certain performances. It's a specialized situation. Not discrediting my career or my solo thing, but, we go and play everywhere. Supersonic, it's kind of, everybody, Kenny's very busy, with his studio career and then playing with John Fogerty and lots of other things. So, we have other, each of us have other things. Fabrizio is constantly producing other artists in the studio in Los Angeles. I mean, he's a very, very busy producer as well. So, and then while Fabrizio's producing other albums and Kenny's out with John Fogerty or, whoever he's out with at that particular time, I will be out with my trio touring and also making records. And I've been working on a studio album for the last couple of years. I did some tracks with Fabrizio in LA, some of the stuff that we talked about earlier. And then, also with Paul Nelson, who worked.
I was going to ask you about that because Paul Nelson is your manager, and he, of course, worked with Johnny Winter. And,
right.
And in fact, I spoke to Paul just yesterday, quite frankly.
Right.
So, there you go. Let me talk about then Johnny Winter, and you've been compared to some of those classic guys, Johnny, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Is that where your musical background lies, in those kind of players? Or because I've also heard you talk a lot about how Jimi Hendrix has changed your life. Who was sort of your major influence? Where does Lance Lopez start picking up a guitar and say,
it all starts with, where it really started was Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry was my first biggest guitar hero, the very first one. And then it was Jimi Hendrix. And, Hendrix really set the bar for me as a child. When I first discovered Jimi Hendrix, I mean, there was nothing else, and that raised the bar for me. And then, to discover him and then find out he had been gone so long was just so bittersweet, and even drove me even harder to really, just immerse myself into his world of playing and approach and the whole essence of Hendrix. And I always, set the bar. He set the bar for me. So, and it wasn't until a couple of months before Stevie Ray Vaughan actually died, I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan. I saw him in June. He passed away in August. And so, like I said, Hendrix had set the bar. And then when I saw Stevie Ray in Dallas, when we first moved over to Dallas, that's when I said, man, there it is. There's a guy that's nailing it. Because that's what I said. He always set the bar. So when I saw Stevie, and then Stevie started playing Hendrix, I was like, oh my God, there we go. And then he was gone. So a lot of it was that, and it put me on a path to the blues. And there's so much influence. I mean, Hendrix being the main one. There for a long time, but there was still so much, there was so much more than that. I mean, there were so many British and American guitarists that just totally influenced me. I mean, all the British blues rock, or they were really considered rock guys in the early '70s. Were all big heroes of mine, and then of course, being in this region of the world, I mean, there was no getting away from ZZ Top and Johnny Winter and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And it just, as luck would have it, and as the destiny would have it, I would just, cross paths with everybody except Stevie, because Stevie was gone. And what makes that even so tragic is that, I was friends with Miss Vaughan. I was friends with their mother, with Jimmy and Stevie Ray's mom, and did a lot of charity events for her. And very close, was in a band with Tommy Shannon for a while, out of Austin, and and know all the guys, know everybody that worked with Stevie Ray, and I'm playing a show with Jimmy Vaughan next month, and that's what makes it so sad is as I'm friends with Billy Gibbons for many years, and was friends with Johnny Winter for many years before he passed away, and we were very close. That's what's so sad is that everybody says, man, you and Stevie Ray would have hit it all. You guys would have been, two peas in a pot, especially. And the connection was the love of Jimi Hendrix. And that's what they said. And so many of those people around would say, man, we've never seen anybody love Hendrix more than Stevie until we met you. So I think that's a big common denominator for my comparison to Stevie Ray Vaughan, was that we were both just big Hendrix freaks. That was, and then being from Texas and being Texas blues players, because that was really the thing there, and that's what drew me to Stevie Ray Vaughan. Was that I was way into Hendrix before I saw him in concert. So that is one thing that kind of makes his passing even more tragic for me personally, is that getting to know his friends and family and everybody in the inner circle, in SRV's inner circle, that say that. I mean, it's been people that, at different occasions have said, man, it's just such a shame because you guys would have been great friends, just like me and Johnny Winter were great friends, and just like me and Billy Gibbons still are great friends, So, I'm a product of my environment, but I'm also a product of my influence as well, Yeah,
absolutely. And listening to you there, I noticed that you missed my guitar hero, Ace Frehley. Did that kind of glam rock or that kind of rock affect you at all? Were you into the Jimmy Pages, the Ace Frehleys, those 70s?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay.
Oh man, my first band I ever saw, the first concert I ever saw was Kiss.
What year?
Ace wasn't there. It was the mid-'80s, and I cried. I went and saw Kiss, and it was
Vinnie Vincent.
It was mid-'80s. They had no makeup on. It was like, they were singing "Lick It Up," and it was still Kiss. It was still great. But I was like, wait a minute, who are these guys? This is not what is going. I was so confused, and I was so little. I was such a little kid, and I was looking for Space Ace, No Space Ace. And I literally cried at the concert, was crying because there was no, it was like, this is not Kiss, you know?
Well,
and so the Kiss that was the actually first band. And yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we were, you know, I grew up in that era in the 80s and absolutely. And with all that, yes, you know, Space Ace was huge guitar hero of mine, as well as Jimmy Page and Leslie West and Alvin Lee and all those guys, you know, and I was so drawn to those players, you know, during that time. And, you know, growing up in the 80s when all that kind of rock was happening, I was still just like a decade behind, you know, and that's why I didn't know that I was like a blues player. But I was like gravitating, you know, I'd hear Mississippi Queen and go, oh my God, that's it. Not, you know, not some of this, you know, the stuff that was in the 80s. It just seemed so, I play very fast, but sometimes, but it just seemed a little too, you know, it was like when I heard Leslie West, it was like, I could feel it, you know. And some of the other stuff I just couldn't feel in my soul, and so that's what I was connecting to, and so yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up in the '80s, it was like, you know, you know, I was more of a rock player as a kid, learning how to play guitar and playing that before, you know, the blues really got me.
Yeah, and I can appreciate the fact that seeing Vinnie Vincent or whoever you saw replacing Ace will bring a tear to your eye because it's just not right.
I think, you know, I can't remember. I think it may have been Bruce Kulick or somebody. I don't even remember who it was. But yeah, no, I cried. I mean, because there, you know, I was ready to see Kiss. You know, I grew up with Kiss Meets the Phantom movies, and we had Rock and Roll Over. It was one of the first albums me and my older brother ever had. So, you know, and then the smoking, I mean, my first love was the Les Paul. You know, I played Straps forever, but my first love was the Les Paul because of Space Ace and Jimmy Page, you know.
Cherry Sunburst.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and the smoking Les Paul and the whole thing. And I was, well, where's the Les Paul that's supposed to have the smoke coming out? You know, this is what happened, you know. And as a little kid, you know, it was crushing. So, which I was very, you know, at later on as an early, you know, my early 20s or late teens or whenever it was when they did the reunions, you know, I was there, and then, you know, it was great. So I did actually get to see the full lineup, the real lineup, and you know, I've seen them on the last few tours, which, you know, with Tommy Thayer, which it was just still great. But yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate to be able to see him on the reunion tours in the 90s, late 90s, and, you know, so that was good.
Yeah, and we'll get off Kiss in a second, but I saw 11 of those reunion shows, and last Thursday, I wasn't interviewing you, I actually was interviewing Ace Frehley, and
wow.
So just type in Google Mitch Lafon, Ace Frehley. It was great. Half an hour. He gave me some great candid answers. We talked about the reunion tour. We talked about the mistakes making Psycho Circus and all that, but enough about me. You are hopefully going to be in Canada soon on tour, so if you could just, general overview, what is the touring situation, both with the Supersonic Blues Machine and solo? Will we see you here soon? Because we do have a great jazz fest, blues fest, and all that stuff up here in Montreal. Does Canada see you soon?
Yeah, hopefully. I you know, we're with the release of these new albums, which it's been a few years since I've had any albums come out. So with the release of the live album and then Supersonic and Blues Machine, and then we hopefully will have one of my solo studio albums follow behind that. We should have some touring coming up, some pretty active touring through that area. So yeah, I mean, the best way to find tour dates is either through my Facebook, which is just Facebook/Lance Lopez Band, or www.lancelopeztx.com. And we have all our tour dates and all that stuff on there. So that's the best ways to check back. But yeah, at this time we're planning this summer to start mounting up and hitting it pretty hard again. I've been kind of back around, you know, the last couple of years. I've been finishing the Supersonic record. I've stayed really regional around Texas and the Southeast, and some out on the West Coast and some on the East Coast. But this summer we'll see us going back abroad, very regularly. So be on the lookout. We'll definitely be there soon.
Very much looking forward to it. Lance, great pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you so much, Mitch. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And there you have it, folks, my interview with guitarist Lance Lopez. The new band is Supersonic Blues Machine. The new album is West of Flushing, South of Frisco, out now on the Mascot label group. So please check that out. Check me out on Twitter at Mitch Lafon. Facebook is one-on-one Mitch Lafon. Big thank you to Vicky Hamilton for being a part of the show as well. And, of course, Lance Lopez. Please come back soon, folks. There is always an interesting interview waiting to happen. There you go. That's it. Bye for now. Oh, my.